It is here, it is finally upon us. Patch 3.0 and also the launch of the Forge of the Chaos Dwarfs DLC. In this video today, I'm going to go through these patch notes. It's a doozy, it's huge. You probably can't see it on the far right over here because of the resolution, but this is a very small little cursor for me to go through all this. I have the patch notes a simple day ahead of time, so we're going to go through this and you can just kind of listen in as you're downloading the game or what have you. But the way I'm going to break this down is by going through all of the changes made as far as additions to the UI and how, say, any articulating unit works. So stuff like chariots and the such, those things were all added in 3.0. I'm going to go through that first. Those are actually at the very bottom of these patch notes. In my typical fashion of trying to upfront knowledge, this is such a dense set of patch notes. The big things, though, are a bunch of balance changes, namely to a lot of Kislev units, a lot of Nurgle units, a ton of stuff with a lot of point changes. High elves, like their dragons, lose flaming attacks because now they don't want to have the Chaos Dwarfs just crush them because the dragons have flaming attacks and they get that 25% resistance against it. Not sure how I feel about that. But also a lot of changes too to say how the Mortis engines work with their healing effect. Their healing effect has been halved, but depending on which one you're using, say the Mortis engine now imbues magical attacks or the Unholy Lodestone gives leadership. So there are a ton of changes to go through. I'll put the chapters that you can jump to, these sets of changes, so you can kind of see them in whichever set interests you the most. And I do not have a link for this right now, but as soon as I get one, I'll put it in the description. You can jump ahead to that. Also, don't forget to check me out on Twitch, where I will be streaming, of course, Total War Warhammer 3, but also Crusader Kings 3 and its DLCs that are coming out. Any of the stuff coming up with Bannerlord, any of the stuff coming up with Age of Wonders 4, tons of stuff going up on my Twitch. And lastly, if you've not yet pre-ordered or you have not picked up Forge of the Chaos Dwarfs, you can use my link to Creative Assembly's affiliate website. It's a great way to support the channel and it helps me out a ton. But let's go ahead and get started here on patch 3.0 and its update. Using the lovely high elf theme, let's go ahead and just look at this real quick. So here's just kind of some of the highlights. Of course, we get the Mirror of Madness added. That is a free bit of content. Ulrika is added, of course. There's the new randomization feature. So if you go into the Immortal Empires, you can press a random button and it'll just chooses a race for you. So if you're just a master of Warhammer and you just want to, like, well, I'll play a campaign, but I'll play any campaign, press the button, there you go. Aim shoe with new line of sight adjustments along with a variety. Okay, that's a lie. I'm not gonna lie to you. It's line of sight adjustments as it pertains to certain things that are in the way, like lampposts. If you I just died. If you guys have watched any of the content I've put out for the Chaos Dwarfs, the line of sight problems that were always there with gunpowder don't seem to be fixed that much that I've seen. And maybe you guys have seen it and know better than I do. I'm very much a fair weather Total War player when it comes to gunpowder. If it was bow and arrow, I know that one hands down. But the high elves don't use gunpowder, so I'm really not very good with that one. So I have not noticed that to be a true huge line of sight adjustments, mainly with stuff like I said, lampposts and other small things that would otherwise block line of sight. Also, a lot of AI tweaks with how they operate in, say, settlement battles and what have you. But let's jump all the way to the bottom here. Also, new sweep of balance changes to Bretonnia, Dark Elves, Grand Cathay, Greenskins, and more. We're gonna go all the way to the bottom. See what I mean here? This thing is huge. Oh my god, it's so girthy. The patch is not me. I just small dick, huge balls. Okay, so game here, we can see that here are some of the stuff that is coming with 3.0. So, articulated vehicle collision overhaul. And this is huge. This is a lot to talk about. But basically what I'm going to break down here for you is look at this photograph. Look at this white box and look at this red box. This thing is turning, right? This Cold One chariot is turning. And what happens is that the Cold One chariot ends up getting stuck on little snag points like these red little hit points here, and then the overall actual chariot cart. This would cause the chariot to not correctly path through things, or when it wanted to turn or you wanted to push it through stuff, it just really wouldn't work. So this caused this kind of collision and kind of a wonkiness for chariots. So now in 3.0, you can see that this is how it's done. So the white box right here is that is what's moving, right? That's the articulation point. That's the axis point right here as it pertains to the actual chariot cart. Now in 3.0, all this red, these are individual contact points that actually collide with the enemy. So to illustrate, here is a comparison of the effective collision setup of a Colt 1 Chariot in 3.0 compared to the previous iteration. In this image, the effective collision in melee is circled. This is the collision that is applied in a melee situation. As you can see, the vehicle is a lot more representative of its visual model when executing a turn. This helps articulated vehicles out when moving through enemy units, but also presents more opportunities for enemies to attack as well, since they are now also able to attack any part of the effective collision instead of attempting to crowd around and hit a single collision block. As part of this change, every articulated vehicle in the game has had its collision and articulation properties overhauled in order to fit the mold of the new logic. Overall, this change is far-reaching in scope, but it solves a large standing invisible and overall negative element for articulated units. We will, of course, monitor how it works and tweak where necessary. So that's actually a really cool thing because it makes chariots much better. The Chaos Dwarfs use tons of stuff when it comes to chariots because of the Doom train, right? You've got your Skull Taker or your Iron Demon pulling a Dreadquake mortar. It's kind of wonky at first until you actually kind of get the hang of it, but it's nice to see that these kind of collision points make it a lot easier for you to kind of move and hit enemies and clear the way, but also conversely now remember that you will take more damage because they'll be able to surround more of it, if you think of it that way, right? Like rather than just simply surrounding here, they're gonna be able to surround each and every part of it to do the damage. And that's kind of the thing, like a bonus versus large melee unit is only limited on the amount of models it can get in base contact, quote unquote, right? Versus a range unit can shoot all of its shots into it. So there's that kind of difference, and this articulation allows for more units to surround these larger entities. But moving on here to the Lord of Fire. Is that supposed to be lore or lore? I like Lord of Fire, to be totally honest. That sounds sick. But the new Lore of Fire visuals. So as you guys have probably seen through a lot of the early access content, the Lore of Fire has had a brand new visual overhaul, meaning a lot of brand new cool visuals. Flaming Sword of Ruin has a big, huge sword that actually like shines above them. Fireball looks a little bit cooler. So a lot of really cool things there. Flamestorm is a really cool, huge tornado. A very nice overhaul there for the Lore of Fire, which was otherwise a very underwhelming lore. Even in tabletop, I didn't like it very much. But flaming and magical attack visualization. So if you have flaming and magical attacks, you don't get like a sparkly little thing like you're playing World of Warcraft on your blade. When you hit something, there's an actual VFX that shows you that that's actually appearing, which is kind of nice. Now for graphics, Chaos Trolls and Armor Trolls faction colors are no longer misaligned in the 2D porthole. I'm not going to go through all this. Reworked chariots to prevent them from clipping through each other, which is nice. Lava Corruption prefabs will now appear correctly on the campaign map. And a lot of this stuff that says it fixes certain corruption visual effects, it's not a 100% fix. You're still going to see those jagged, hard edges in some locations and some not in other locations. I don't know if it's a result of the corruption, a result of that specific terrain style, or whatever it is, but those do still exist. A lot of these graphics changes are for the 2D portholes, as you can see right here. 2D, 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 and 2D. Fix the two-way waterfall in the mountains of Morn province. Finally, that's done, right? Resolve terrain blending issues around the river of Urskoy region. So a lot of little kind of fixes and changes here to the graphics overall. I'm not going to go through all of those. Same thing here with audio. A lot of fixes and cleanups with the audio, like fixed Eltharion's campaign UI panel VO having too much darn reverb. Yeah, and that's actually something I noticed when I played Eltharion last, was you'd pop out of that out of his bat cave, and you'd click on another lord and it would get that same reverb you get when you're in the bat cave. So that's been fixed up a little bit here. Missing sounds for Luther Harkin's campaign rating stance, stuff like that has all been changed. Stonehorn VO is now louder in battle, what have you, and so on and so forth. Now for other new things added, new missile block icon is the icon for missile block has been improved. It now uses a single unified icon that better fits the game's overall style. Check it out in the image below, next to the armor value. Bronze, silver, and gold shield. Is there anything with a gold shield? I think there's one thing in the game that's got a gold shield. Let me know in the comment section. I can't remember. UI. Okay, so dev note. Sticky tooltips have been added to a large number of game elements, most notably technology, skill building, and unit cards. These new tooltips allow you to inspect the elements once they have stuck. Inspectable elements within these tooltips will be denoted with an eye icon. The timings for sticky tooltips appearing sticking and hiding can be modified in the options menu, as I've shown off in that video. Plus tooltips for effects that apply to specific units now display the unit cards of the relevant unit types, which I just love so much. So here are all of the little things that they've added in. Added enable all and disable all buttons to the campaign notifications menu. The campaign list now fills rows first instead of columns. Which I love. It was so hard to kind of like go through it alphabetically because it was a weird way of doing it. So rows first, so left to right, and then columns rather than top to bottom, left to right. Required content tooltips have been given the sticky tooltip treatment so that they are easier to read. Reintroduce the missing special port icon next to settlements. Time mission rewards with 10 or more are often no longer cut off. Settlements marked for conversion no longer show construction. Where is one of the good ones in here? I've got a couple good ones. Unit stat icon tooltips no longer close intermittently in battle. All legendary heroes now display their bespoke short description when recruited. Rank elements no longer overlap character portraits in the event list. The Winds of Magic reserve capacity is now shown in tooltips. Miscast base or miscast chance bonuses are now correctly shown in the battle UI, which is actually pretty huge. Improved the blending of the pre-battle screen for Bretonnian battles. Stop defeated factions from appearing in the Vampire Coast infamy list. Getting ambushed by a military force. Norsca Monstrous Arcanum can now be closed with the escape key. Story panels can now be viewed from the movie viewer. Achievements. 11 new achievements have been centered around the free Mirror of Madness DLC that launches with the update. Shh, you didn't see them already. Text and translation. Who cares about that? So, not every little thing is detailed like I thought it was. I thought I had read like a lot more in this than I did, and it's clearly not the case. But a lot of these little tweaks you'll kind of notice as you play through, and it should hopefully make for a better, more enjoyable experience for you. Let me know how you feel about this when you start to jump into the game and you experience some of this stuff, especially how this collision works. I personally never ever use chariots. They piss me off on an ungodly level. But you can let me know how you like those chariots in that comment section. So let's jump up to another portion of the patch notes. We're going to go real quick through campaign and battles now. I've moved up through the notes because there's a whole big section on balance that I wanted to, like individual race balance. I wanted to touch these more broad sections first, then you can get to the individual race sections as you see fit. So campaign here, so general updates fix an issue where gold was being awarded to a mission target instead to the mission owner. Updated campaign map battle section for both Realm of Chaos and Immortal Empires. And then for the Realm of Chaos, reduce the number of factions at war with the Ice Court at the start of a Realm of Chaos campaign, and the visibility of Chaos Realms is now correctly saved upon reloading a game. In cases where a faction or for diplomacy had mission-driven confederation, a small boost had been applied to the confederated faction, making it less likely to die before the player can complete the mission. That's actually kind of nice. For battles here, though, we have the new endless survival battles, where you get a bunch of like waves of monsters that you fight off, enemies that you fight off. These battles can be played solo, co-op, or with up to 4 players. Enemies will periodically spawn and attack you, featuring every unit from the chosen enemy race. Each map has 3 capture points, with one starting within the player's deployment. Each capture point gives you supplies that can be used to root on reinforcements, upgrades, and replenishment, and difficulty is scaled based on both the player count and time survived. These battles cannot be won. So here we see the Pillar of Bone, endless survival battle versus a greenskin. So I think that's actually a pretty cool way to, like, this could be a fun thing to just kind of stream and have fun, either solo or like with a friend or two, like, or if you want to play a co-op with some bros, you definitely can. It's a pretty cool little mode here. It just kind of comes as a part of an FLC, I guess you could say, with the game. It's with 3.0. Ambush battles have had some little tweaks here. Updated and corrected the deployment zones and ambush maps on Ulthuan Coast or Shrine of Cain ambush map battle. Choke point battles, domination battles, and free-for-all battles all have had a little bit of tweaking, mainly on the maps themselves. Land battles have had some tweaking here too. A lot of stuff with visual assets and graphics, less with actual stuff that coincides with the battle itself. Settlement battles themselves too. I've had a bit of a tweaking. Nothing crazy here. It's mainly, again, just a lot of visual assets. I think this should be more in a different section, like geared on like, hey, here's the graphical changes we've done. Like fix a terrain gap issue. That's not really something I think of like, oh, you've increased something with settlement battles. So those things now have been changed and flipped around. Siege battles adjusted the terrain at wall firing locations in the Red Fortress Chaos map, stop settlement wall towers from dealing damage to their own walls and gatehouses, and fix unit docking issues in the Black Fortress battle map. Same thing here with subterranean survival and other significant battle changes that have been present. Just pretty much changes to stuff like that. But other significant battle changes, the reinforcement panel in domination survival battle is now able to be repositioned, and the teleport withdraw time is from 3 seconds to now 10, and reinforcements resummoning time has gone from 30 to 45 seconds. So these are a lot of your battle and campaign changes. And just to quickly talk about multiplayer here, we have a quick battle map rotation changes. So the big ones that have been removed are Broken Hills, Compass Reach, and Crystal Mountains. And these are the ones that have been added into the rotation. So if you play a lot of multiplayer quick battles, here are your new maps added into the rotation for you on top of the existing ones that were not removed in this patch. For stability, performance, and gameplay, we have quite a cool little bit of options or additions here. So FPS drops when the province tab is open should no longer happen. That's a very nice one. A potential crash when going into battle due to the cleanup of military forces when leaving the campaign has been fixed. It's just a lot of crash fixing. But I have noticed personally a much better increase in frames per second playing the game. And I noticed my CPU temperature would typically hover around the upper 70s, low 80s degrees Celsius, and I have a closed loop intercooler in there. Intercooler? This isn't a car. A closed loop I/O. I have a bunch of fans in there. I'm pretty good about that, and it was still hovering at 80 degrees Celsius. Now I'm hanging out a 60 plus degrees, low 70 degrees Celsius when I play the game, which is what I would expect from a pretty CPU intensive game. So take that with a grain of salt. That's a your mileage may vary type of thing. So see how this patch really changes your performance of the game. But in my experience, it has definitely helped out and increased my FPS and dropped my temperatures quite a bit. For gameplay, 3.0 is stacked. So for ease, here's a few highlights here for your perusal. You can now preview a landmark building you'll get access to in the settlement by hovering over it. We've talked about that. This is the section that I knew that they talked about stuff. We're introducing a new pack file limit that increases the number of mods that can be hypothetically run simultaneously, barring any cross-mod issues. We've added a new panel that allows you to search for certain items on the campaign map. There are now 2 categories of search options available: physical items, settlements, provinces, factions, and characters, and landmarks/resources. Clicking any search result item will move the camera to show it. Multiple buildings that were incorrectly marked as destructible have been updated game-wide, including those found within maps for the Vampire Counts, Dwarfs, Dark Elves, and more. Updated the campaign map battle selection for both the Realm of Chaos and Immortal Empire's campaign maps to ensure that the correct battle tiles are displayed. So like a contextual one, so you jump into a battle on the coastline, you have a coast battle. Increase the effect of the A Stranger Comes event for all Order factions. New regions and provinces have made their way into the Realms of Chaos and Immortal Empire's campaign maps of Warhammer 3. Not only that, the Earth's plates have shifted, causing some to find a new home elsewhere. Explore the lands and discover new settlements, regions, and conquer them if you wish. I unfortunately just don't have that cool knowledge of the campaign map to cite which ones have been added or taken away or changed. So I apologize for not having any kind of conducive list on this. Lore Master of Sotek probably does have a list like that, or one to soon come. Be on the lookout for it. A lot of you guys, you eagle-eyed watchers, have noticed a lot of new settlements and provinces. So if you do, go ahead and feel free to leave a comment about that. I unfortunately do not know which ones are added or whatnot. Alongside the additions and relocations, several regions have had their borders adjusted. Certain settlements within those regions have been moved around. Roads have been tweaked where necessary, and a new sea lane has been added between River Ruin and the Frozen Sea. It's also worth noting stuff like Grimgor Ironhide has moved his starting location from basically one province south, so he's just north of Zarnagron. I don't even think that's in these patch notes, period. So I've checked some of the starting locations. Most of them seem to be the same, but some are probably moved, and I just am dumb and haven't realized it. So take those, again, with a grain of salt. So rules and systems. Missions that require the taking of specific regions now complete instantly rather than on the start of your next turn, which is always nice. Allied recruitment will now take into account the military force bonus value. Updated various choke point areas on the map to correctly load into ambush battles. We'll get there when we talk about the Dark Elves, which you can now get Black Arcs as an allied recruitment. And I love that. I think that's really sick. So for AI rules and logic, dev note here says, walled settlement battles and battles in general have received some improvements in the form of AI adjustments. We've been monitoring the feedback closely following the settlement changes we made in Update 2.2, and we hear your concerns. With the following, we hope to alleviate some of the responsiveness and issues you have experienced. We'll be keeping a close eye on how the changes work out. So a lot of these changes exist to kind of remove player bias and help out with the AI making a lot of bad decisions and moves, especially when it comes to walled settlements and sieges, where they kind of double back on themselves. They go to try to not take capture points, whatever it is. They've kind of fixed that logic a little bit here. In my experience of playing with the with patch 3.0 and the early access beta, I didn't notice anything completely stand out, but I also wasn't really looking for it. So if you guys noticed it in any of the content creators that you watched, let it be known here, AI units will be less likely to blob together and will instead remain coordinated upon entering a walled settlement. I've not noticed that. I've noticed that it's not changed. But I also, again, wasn't particularly looking for it, so my eye was maybe sweeping right over it. Artillery units targeting breaches will now more reliably reposition if they cannot successfully fire at the target. In settlement battles, improvements have been made to the AI unit's priority analysis of areas within a settlement. This makes AI units more reliably prioritize capturing and recapturing capture points, like I was saying. Wall breaching AI unit groups no longer share wall breach targets with other nearby units. This resolves an AI issue, or an issue where units were not targeting closest available wall pieces. Updated outflank AI to handle flying units better. In settlement battles, when the attacking army is AI controlled, it will more consistently deploy a nearby reinforcement's arrival location and wait for reinforcements before proceeding. I've always known that to be the case, so maybe I'm off on that. Improved logic involved in determining how many breaches the AI will attempt to create before waiting units begin entering settlements. I mean, all this is great, and Indie Pride will mirror this sentiment pretty well. I hate doing siege battles, settlement or otherwise, a minor settlement or otherwise. Like they're too huge for the small size of my force, and they're always just like one wall, right? So all this stuff might be true, but I don't really deal with these contracted sieges against, or with the AI fighting me with all these impressive siege implements and doing all this stuff. It's always just kind of a bum rush for the capture points or them just trying to sack everything. So be that as it may, for all these AI improvements, maybe this is going to make the battles a lot better. I have personally not experienced it, and I'd love to get your feedback in the comment section about how you feel about these. Try it out though, see how it feels. Let me know what your thoughts are. It doesn't seem like a bunch of really cool improvements to me, and that I'm not to diminish it at all. I don't want to say that. I'm just saying, like, all this stuff kind of, it's like there's a bigger problem that's not the AI so much as like the way the sieges actually work is the biggest problem, I think. So into the campaign AI, adjusted the strategic threat calculation for immortal empires. Direct actions against a faction are now much more important in that calculation, and the importance of distance scaling has been increased, improving the way AI will select the most relevant threats. So this kind of talks about player bias, basically. And I have not been able to see how this works because Chaos Dwarfs are chaotic, and thusly almost every Order faction declares war on them on sight. So I haven't been able to determine how that really works out here because everyone hates me. Further tweaks have been made to AI's recruitment priorities to favor higher value units. Additionally, the AI will place more weight on building a recruitment building if they are without one. And again, on this one too, I can't say that I've experienced anything other than it. I've noticed that, like, say, for example, Imric, he had a ton of armored archers versus archers with light armor versus just your naked archer, which is, I guess, better. But I mean, the Kislev army still had nothing but hybrid Cossars. And I think that's more of a symptom of the fact that Kislev's roster is just bare bones right now. So there's not even a lot of units for it to take advantage of. So that's been my mild experience with the AI from the Chaos Dwarf perspective. Fixed various cases of the AI trying to enter stances were invalid. Okay. All factions now care about their strategic situation when generating a war declaration goal. Improved AI performance in the first turn of the game. Minor AI factions should now be more accepting of vassalization. I love that. Reduce the distance required for the maximum distance modifiers to be applied on both. Okay, whatever. War declaration on a faction of the same subculture is now less likely for High Elf Major, Empire Major, and all Lizardmen factions. So High Elf Major being the major factions of the High Elves, not the minor ones, such as any of the colonies. Like, those are the minor ones. So the Empire minor factions are ones that you cannot play. So that's just to kind of give you an example of what a major is. All factions now consider war losses when evaluating a peace deal. Previously, Skaven Majors, Dwarfs, and Tomb Kings were not. So those are your AI changes for the game. Now, line of sight is another big one. So again, you can see here that this is not the biggest thing that the kind of precursor patch notes would let you believe, right? Line of sight has long been a sticking point of Warhammer 3's overall battle responsiveness. We're making some adjustments with Update 3.0. As you'll see below, many of the issues came from various objects and props in the environment, which would sometimes lead to units attempting to walk through a destructible object rather than shoot over it. We're continuing to iterate this work, but please keep the feedback coming in as we continue to tweak the many facets that can prevent your units from firing when they should. We've updated the corrected logic on various prop buildings to work better with line of sight issues across battle maps game-wide, including but not limited to lampstands on Dark Elf battle maps, Bretonnia and Grand Cathay market stalls, tents, tables, and other destructible assets that probably start with a T to continue the alliteration. Ogre Kingdom's environmental objects, typically those on the ground like bones and carts, several constructible towers on the Shangyang map, and then tiny destructible pieces of terrain game-wide that were especially detrimental to gunpowder units, wall collision on Dwarf maps. Further tweaks, updated the building collisions on platform. Okay, that's not actual line of sight. So, I mean, cool to see that is a change made, and maybe these are actually having more wide-sweeping effects than I'm experiencing, but what I've experienced in 3.0 with the Chaos Dwarfs and playing on the Chaos Dwarfs maps for the most part, right? Because that's the kind of contextual maps that you're getting in combat. Line of sight is still as grueling of an issue as it always has been for gunpowder units, right? And especially, too, if you're using gunpowder Chaos Dwarfs firing over other Chaos Dwarfs, and they just don't give a crap. They just shoot right into the back of their own bros. And they can shoot over goblins, but they cannot shoot over dwarfs, and they will not shoot over orcs. The orc laborers are considered an obstruction, and they will not shoot, period. Versus a Chaos Dwarf is a partial obstruction, and they'll shoot over their bros, but hit them for the most part. And as goblins, they'll barely. It's like a 50-50 for a Chaos Dwarf. It's like a 25-75 for a goblin. So line of sight does continue to be an issue, and a lot of what it comes down to is how you're going to organize your troops. A lot of people have told me, you have to stagger them in a set where it's like, okay, you've got a frontline unit of infantry, then a backline unit of gunpowder units with a gap in between the next infantry unit so that they're staggered and offset, and that's the best way to take advantage of it. So try to use that as best you can until line of sight is fixed. But let's now go into the massive and biggest part of the patch notes, races and balance. So this portion is huge, and I am not going to read every little thing. What I'm going to do is read the dev note from each section and just go from there. It's just too intensive. I will stop in certain locations and talk about certain things that have been done and changed with the races, but if there's a specific race that you play a lot of in multiplayer or in single player, or one you struggle with, or you're one like, you know what, I don't play those guys, but they just suck right now, or they're really good right now, and I want to see if there's any challenges or changes, I encourage you just to jump onto the patch notes and check out for yourself, because a lot of it does come down to multiplayer costs, and those things, if you're a campaign player, are not going to be important to you. So I don't want to just go through all those little things and waste your time. So here's what this is, a lot of the stuff here that changes in the very first turn for a lot of characters. Zhao Ming, Grease's Goldtooth, 10-1, Krokgar, Tarux, Snikch, Helman Gorst, and Fey Enchantress have all had their start tweaked a little bit as far as how the settlements and the starting positions, their strength of nearby settlements work, so they can take a settlement on their first turn. So that does kind of help with their power ramp in the very beginning of the game. Now for spells, all that this is going to talk about, for the most part, like you look at Plague and Flamestorm, this is going to be different, is a ton of tweaking to the Winds of Magic costs, and I unfortunately will not be going through these. A lot of the lore depth, though, I can say has had a lot of tweaks, either up or down, like Kraken's Pull is now more expensive, Vargheist's Revenge is now more expensive. So keep those things in mind. If there's a particular spell lore that you do use, go and take a look. But Flamestorm, for example, because we did just get an overhaul to the lore fire, that has gotten an overhaul as well. Explosion Force from 40 to now 500. Movement speed from 4 to now 2. Max angle change per movement frequency from 170 to 360. So it'll turn around a lot and start kind of moving all over the place. So you can, and also it's the same thing with the upgraded. So that is across the board here. So a lot of these here are all over the place. Curse of Leper, which is from 7 now to 8. Drillers Below, 17 to 20. Curse of the Midnight Wind, 11 to 9. Was there any big ones I wanted to talk about? Invocation to Heck went up 1 Wind of Magic, and same thing here with its upgraded costs as well. Raise Dead went from 4 to 5 too. Those are some pretty big ones, because that's kind of like the the biggest thing when it comes to playing the vampires. Thought I heard a cat meow. I'm sorry. I got pulled out right there. But for some abilities, we've had a lot of changes here as well. So Master of the Dead is no longer a flat ability. It now has an increasing intensity that increases when entities are killed within a 35-meter radius of the character with Master of Dead. So this regeneration effect gets more and more and more the more that stuff gets killed around him. But some other stuff here, Lord of Torment, mana regen modifier from 10 to 20%, and heal amount from 0.4 to now 0.3, so a slight nerf in that healing. Dark Master is from unique to uncommon. But the big ones here I want to point out are both Reliquary Binding and Unholy Lodestone. Oh, also Soul Hunters. That's 22%, now down to 10%. So keep an eye on that. But Reliquary Binding, this is the one that applies to your Mortis engine. So the heal amount has been halved, but you now get magic attacks with this. And Unholy Lodestone, again, same amount of healing amount has been halved, but now you get leadership with it. So keep those things in mind, that maybe you're not getting as much healing, or why the hell is that not healing me as much? It's because of this patch has reduced that amount. So those are those big changes right there. For the Beastmen, there's not too many changes for the Beastmen with this time around, although they should benefit quite nicely from the upgrades to articulated vehicles that have been made. We've given Bestigors a nice buff too, as they were underperforming across the board. This should improve their combat potential as elite infantry. A lot of these are just kind of issues with Herdstones and whatnot. Clarify the effect given by the unique Herdstone building available at Dwarf, and that provides melee attack when fighting against all human races other than just Empire and Bretonia. So stuff like that. And for the Bestigors, leadership's been increased and their melee defense has been increased. Moving into Bretonia, had a rough time lately, so to help a little, their late game cavalry has been given a few sturdy buffs. In the future, we hope to bring Bretonia's battle capabilities up a notch to meet some of the newer factions, but in the interest of not over egging the particular pudding, we'll be that is a term, holy crap. We'll be keeping a close eye on how they progress in the present after this update. It's worth noting that 3.1 is on the horizon apparently, and I think that a lot of these updates, like Kislev and Bretonia, will probably get more in 3.1. So diplomatic penalties between Corone and Marienburg, but let's see here. Grail Knights, melee defense is increased by 2 and bonus versus large has been increased by 6. And Guardians have had their attack increased pretty substantially up to 42 with a 50 charge bonus and AP from 13 to 20. So that's their kind of top end cav, just to kind of show those off. The Pegasus Knights too have had a pretty good buff across the board, gaining everywhere and not losing anything from what I can see here. Same thing with the Royal Pegasus Knights and what have you. Technology, that's nothing crazy. Increased turn duration required for Bordeloo Confederation technology. Okay, so Demons of Chaos, when it looks like the Demons of Chaos haven't received that many changes at first glance, they do benefit from the changes of the Monogod rosters. Our changes here center mostly around Be'lakor, who has received a few nerfs after our data showed him to be overperforming in most cases. And really here, it's just a reduction to his hit points. The rest is all multiplayer related for the most part. His upkeep has gone from 600 to 652, so a small increase there. Hit points have been reduced by a flat 1,000. But those are the things there for the demons. For Dark Elves are in a pretty good place right now battle-wise, but they have been indirectly hit thanks to a bug fixing where riders on their war machines were firing more projectiles than intended. This issue was skewing the performance of Scourge Runner chariots and Bloodwrack cauldrons quite significantly. We've also made a notable buff to Shades, which should help to diversify the weapon variants a little bit more and reduce their recruitment time in campaign. They still do have a really bad issue with their slave economy, and that was not fixed in 3.0 that I can see in any way, shape, or form. So that is unfortunate. The coolest thing here, though, Black Arcs can now be recruited via allied recruitment. I do really love that, and I want to see how that can actually make for very fun allies in the campaign. For a lot of these changes, Bleak Swords have had 10 more armor, which is pretty nice. Where are those? Shades, there we go. So turns to recruit has been reduced to 1. Their melee attack's been increased by 4, and their melee defense has been increased by 4 as well. And their great swords, their melee defense has gone up by 2, and their bonus versus infantry has gone up by 2. So there you go for the Shades. Dwarfs here, now that the Great Shame has finally reared its fiery bovine head, the Dwarfs have upgraded the shields for their melee lords, heroes, and infantry, along with having their recruitment costs tweaked, and the fact that their campaign is still boring. But going through this here, I like this one. Thork Ironbrow has his mission chain for confederating Karak Azul again. He is currently able to confederate the normal way as he does in Warhammer 2. So I like that that's been added back in. For the overall units here, Lord, Thane, Dwarf Warriors, Longbeards, Ironbreakers, all associated regiments of renown. Missile block chance from 35% to 55%. I believe that means they all have silver shields now. If I if I remember how that shakes itself out. It'll shake me out. Grand Cathay. Cathay are generally doing pretty good at the moment, but there were some cost corrections needed for their lords in multiplayer. Jade Warriors have also received some tweaks to bring them in line comparable units to other factions. So, let's go through some of these. Where are the Jade-Blooded that I'm looking for? It's Jade-Blooded, right? It's a Jade Warriors. Jade-Blooded. Jade-Blooded vampires are back. Okay, Jade Warriors melee defense 36 now down to 34. And the Halberds lose 2 melee attack, and they gain, though, 4 melee defense. Those are your Jade Warrior changes there. Again, a lot of this stuff, like you can see, is multiplayer cost, and it's not really worth me talking about. Just kind of jump in and you can see for yourself if you're a big multiplayer player. Greenskins have benefited greatly in this patch and have lots of lovely changes to talk about. All the Savage Orc, Boar Boys, and all their associated big guns have received some melee defense buffs, which should increase their staying power in combat. Pump wagons were severely underperforming, so they received a bit of a redesign to help them stand out a bit from the other war machines on the roster. Now sporting 12 entities per unit on ultra size instead of 4, they should be even more chaotic than before. What? I didn't know that. Oh my god. Finally, we're given Ragnarok Spiders a bit more leadership and buff their damage slightly, as they were also underperforming. Grimgor Ironhide is once again, at last, not a big green boy. Rocklobber's not having projectile trail. Re-added unique garrisons for Skarsniks and Warzog's main settlements and garrison chains. They now have unique ones yet again. So, increase of 10 to the leadership, and also a base weapon and AP damage, as well as bonus versus large for the Ragnarok Spider across the board. And then when it comes to Goblin Wolf Riders, have their firing arc changed from 60 to 360, probably to match the Hobgoblin Wolf Riders, which have a 360 firing arc. Where are the Savage Orcs? Okay, so Savage Orcs, melee attack up 2, melee defense up 4. And you can see that kind of reflected across the board here. Savage Orc big guns, they're going up by 3. War Boys have gone up by 4. The R Boys went up by 2. Snuttling Pump Wagons from model count from 4 down to 12, but their additional hit points now, or additional hit points going from 1150 to 400, or is there saying that it added 400 into that? I don't know. Charge bonus went down a little bit. Rank depth went from 1 to 2, obviously, because they have 12 units. Base weapon damage went down a little bit, and then that AP went down a little bit. Don't look at those as nerfs, by the way. Those values are per unit, per model count in the unit. So those things kind of just bring it in line because it now has 12 models. And this is the same thing here with the Flappas and the spiky rollers. So that's just kind of across the board. For the High Elves, a few corrections and changes for High Elves this time around, but overall they are performing quite well. Lothern Sea Guard and Chariot mounts have received a cost correction. War Lions have received a chunky buff, and the fire resistance of units of Caledorian nobility have been reduced slightly from 40 down to 25%. With the coming of the Chaos Dwarfs, we have also removed flaming attacks from dragon melee weapons, so they remain competitive against this new race of fire resistant units. Breath attacks will still be considered flaming attacks as it was on tabletop. I don't really know how I feel about that, to be totally honest. It's like the only race that really makes it hard is the Chaos Dwarfs. And I feel maybe that should be like a counter pick. Like, oh, okay, well, they're going with a bunch of Chaos Dwarfs. I can't really field tons of dragons against them. But maybe it does make sense to not have their melee attacks cause fire attacks, because it's not like their claws are made of fire, right? So, but the way that flaming attacks work in this game and how viable it is against certain things like undead and demons and whatnot. Maybe demons is only magic attacks. I'm stupid. But undead nonetheless. Maybe it now makes them much weaker against that. I've not play tested it. You know who would know about that is my big bad boy Turin. Turin would definitely know about that. But as we can see here across the board, the Caledorian nobles, like I said, fire resistance from 40 now down to 25. And the big stuff to point out here is the War Lions. Didn't the War Lions get something here? Or is this a generic War Lion? I guess it's just this. The melee attack for the War Lions of Trace, the actual Regiment of Renown, went from 38 to 43. Missile resistance from 20 to 30. Those are quite nice. All the dragons, like we said, no more flaming attacks. Oh, there it goes. I knew it was somewhere. So the War Lions of Trace get more melee attack, and they get more missile resistance, which is actually really nice for them. Khorne has received only minor changes this time around, though we will be watching these closely since they target some of Khorne's key units. Fleshhounds and Minotaurs have been overperforming, so they have been rebalanced. Bloodletters and Forsaken of Khorne have received a small buff, while Chosen of Khorne have been made slightly cheaper to make them more accessible options. Really, I mean, it's nothing crazy here. So I mean, like they lost 2 melee attack and got a little bit more or a little bit less weapon damage and AP. It's just stuff like that. Not a bunch of crazy stuff here for Khorne, to be honest. Here's Minotaurs. It's again very small tweaks. 2 attack, 3 melee defense, and they lost actually 10 charge bonus, which is actually a lot larger than I thought it was. And they lost 3 bonus, which is large for the great weapons. Kislev hasn't been doing great in battles recently, so these changes act as a first step towards improving things. This is why I think they'll be probably given more in 3.1. Armored Cossars and Zargard have received some melee buffs to boost their frontline staying power, while also all Kislev cavalry units get a mass boost to match some of their contemporaries from other races. Iceguard have also gained some additional missile penetration. And it's actually really nice here because they got a pretty good bonus from 32 to 36 melee attack and 38 to 40 for the Armored Cossars. And where's the Zargard? Man. Streltsy got a little bit of a change here too. Zargard, there we go. 34 to 36, 26 to 30 on their base weapon, and 10 to 12 on their AP. And for the Ice Guard with both variants, despite having a magic missile weapon, the penetration of the Ice Guard's projectile was relatively low. Therefore, we've raised this value so the projectile will penetrate and deal damage to more targets per volley. It's hard to quantify this change, but it's certainly a buff. So that's very nice to see. And Dervishes get more armor here. So nice little buff all the way around for Kislev. Lizardmen, lots of cost changes for Lizardmen, with most of their big dinos getting slight discounts. We've also buffed up Croc scores a bit so they are a lot sturdier in combat. Ancient Salamander has also received a recruitment time reduction, which should help it thrive in campaign. The Spirit of Teapot Kotal has also had its bound spell switched out to make it a more viable pick. Let me take a look at what those are. That's kind of the only thing I care about. Croc scores have got health increase, melee defense increase, and added perfect vigor. Oh, that's the cohort of Huatl. That's the Regiment Renown one, but still. Where's Kotal? Where are you, baby? Okay, so no longer has Shield of Thorns and Banishment. Now has Earthblood and Bjorn's Time Warp. Bjorn's Time Warp is very, very good again with the with the Lizardmen. So that's actually a pretty sick buff here, especially since that's bringing it in hidden too, since they can stalk in an area around them, which is nice. So Norska have received a few targeted buffs to some of their underperforming units. Mammoths are cheaper. Famir now get their scaly skin bonus from Tabletop, and Marauder champions with great weapons have been ironed out a bit. The Ice Wolf Chariot have also received a considerable buff to their missile weapons. I don't think I've seen Ice Wolf Chariot in ages being used. A lot of cost reductions here. Missile resistance increases. Champions losing 1 melee attack, base weapon damage, and AP. Famir Warriors melee attack increase, missile damage now 25% because of the scaly skin, and a slight increase to their AP and their base weapon, or a slight decrease to their AP and a slight increase to their base weapon damage. So for Nurgle hasn't been Nurgle haven't been feeling great for a while. Nurgle hasn't been. Is Nurgle plural, or is Nurgle like is that like shrimp and shrimp? Nurgle haven't been feeling great for a while, so we've targeted some changes. Man, I'm trying to read it, but in my brain I'm like, correct it. So we've targeted some changes at some problem units. Some problematic units? Rotflies, Plague Drones, Plague Toads, and Pox Riders have all received some pretty considerable buffs. Also, the -5 speed reduction from Mark of Nurgle has been removed, which is huge actually. So they can move on the battlefield much, much better, much more easily. Lots of changes all the way around. Upkeep changes too, so keep those in mind. Like the Pox Riders and Nurgle for the Barons of the Bog, they go up by 12. Leadership increase, base weapon damage decrease, AP damage increase, run speed increase, acceleration increase, mass increase. And get multiplayer costs to be increased too. Plague Drones, model count's been increased. Health has been increased because there's now 2 more units in there. Melee attack increase, AP damage increased. And then Pox Riders, that same kind of increase that we saw earlier with the base weapon going down, the AP going up, and then the run speed, acceleration, and mass going up as well. And Plague Toads getting a lot of that same treatment. So leadership up, base weapon down, AP up, acceleration up, almost a full point, which is kind of nice. And then acceleration up by half a point as well. So nice to see this across the board. Also, the mortal units getting a lot of love. The Chaos Warriors, the Chosen of Nurgle with great weapons are just absolutely disgusting now because they have a much better run speed, charge speed. Their upkeep cost has gone down too. 400 to 388, 350 to 338. Warriors are not touched, much like myself. And then Chaos Chariots, run speed is increased here, of course. Now, I don't know if this is saying the run speed without the Mark of Nurgle, or they're saying, hey, now that we've removed that debuff to the run speed, here's the new value. I don't know if it's a raw buff or if it's, hey, here's the value now without that Mark of Nurgle penalty. I'm not really sure. I'd have to probably take a look at that in the game. But you can see, nonetheless, quite a lot of things for Nurgle. Ogre Kingdoms haven't been doing too great in battle as of late, so some work is needed to bring them up to scratch. Greases has a few token buffs, although we still recognize that we'll likely have to go further. Ogre Pistols and Cavalry have received some attention to give them a bit more impact across the board. Artillery have received a maneuverability nerf in exchange for a mass buff to emphasize their role a bit better. And I didn't know that they were not good right now, but base weapon damage increase and AP damage increase for Crushers here. Grease's Gold Tooth has had acceleration and deceleration and turn speed changes, and I don't even know how to articulate how those changes really work. Iron Blasters have had an upkeep reduction, acceleration decrease, recruitment cost reduction here as well. Turn speed decrease, entity mass increase though. Let's see, where are... Oh, the Iron Blaster. I was like, where is the artillery? Nobbler Scrap Launcher here, so it has acceleration decrease, turn speed decrease, but entity mass significantly increased as well as turn speed decrease here there. Skaven, these changes don't exist, but if they did, they go something like this. Poison Wind, Globerdeers, and Mortars have had their AP ratio flattened out a bit, while Doom Wheels, Plague Monks, and Censer Bears have received some buffs to make them more viable. The Unclean Energy Bar upgrade is now usable within Thrott's Flesh Lab. The destroyed version of the Plague Furnace now uses the Plague Furnace model instead of the incorrectly using the Warp Lightning Cannon model. Okay. Skaven Neuroparasites now correctly trigger audio. Okay. The quest battle into the scene now placed correctly. Skaven now have access to the Brightstone Mine landmark and Mount Gunbad. That's lovely. If multiple buildings are required to recruit a hero, they are now all shown in the recruitment tooltip. Okay, love that. So, upkeep reductions here for Plague Monk Sensor Bearers. Doom Wheels here, having an increase in their melee attack, an increase in their defense, and then more weapon damage and more AP. Poison Wind Mortars, more damage, less AP. Again, flattening out that curve. 2 more, 2 less. Sensor Bearers here, melee defense going up by 2. Upkeep cost reduction as well, and as well as their recruitment cost going up just slightly. That's it for them. Slaanesh has been performing really well for a while thanks to a few cornerstone units. Devoted Marauders and Hellshutters have been calmed somewhat, while Demonettes and Keeper of Secrets have been buffed. Perhaps the biggest change in the Slaanesh roster, however, is a reduction of physical resistance bonus on all units with the Mark of Slaanesh from 10 down to 5. This should make their mortal front line a bit less oppressive. And as we saw from some of the previous tournaments with them in multiplayer, they were just so strong with that 10% buff to physical resistance and a bunch of other factors as well. But a lot of that has been tweaked across the line here for Slaanesh. Into the Empire, the Demogryph Knights have been the focus of the Empire's changes in this patch. Our metrics show that they were underperforming, and the community source peer reviews suggestion agreed. Good catch, friends. Buffs were therefore in order. Plus, the Luminarch has received a considerable buff with its reload time now halved. Also note that the War Wagon ammunition has been slightly tweaked. War Wagons have 6 gunners, and the unit info panel divides the ammunition by 6 to represent a single volley. The raw ammo number is now also displayed for all you budding gunnery students out there. So, listing the wrong units rewards. I'm trying to see if there's anything cool there. Let's see. Quicksilver's faster. Bright Wizards now have flaming attacks that match their sword visuals. Fair enough. Love that. Demogryph Knights. So their attack has gone up by 2, their leadership by 5, their base weapon up by 1, their AP up by 1, and splash attack knockback force multiplier 0.2 to now 1.6, which is very significant there. And the same thing here with the Demogryph Knight halberds. Luminarch and Temple of the Luminarch of Haish and the Temple. Template? I don't remember. The regiment are now 1. Base reload has again been half from 22 to 11 seconds. 4 to 3 acceleration, entity mass 13 to 1600, and turn speed 80 to 60. So you can see quite a nice little set of buffs there. War Wagons, you can see all that action right there, but nothing crazy aside from what we just talked about. Tomb Kings, there aren't many changes with the Tomb Kings this time around, aside from the Chariot rework, which should help them out a bit across all their Chariot units and mounts. Most of the changes are cost or mass related, so I'm just going to skip through that. Zinch is another faction that is doing relatively okay, but both land and Land Battle and Domination, there's a few targeted changes where the discs receiving more mass, Flamers receiving more projectile velocity, and Chosen being a bit cheaper. I'll look at the Chosen value, but I think other than that, we can move on. Upkeep cost has gone down from 350 to 338, so it looks like they're trying to just kind of make that across the board. And recruitment cost has gone down by 50. For Vampire Coast has been doing fairly well, so the changes to be focused on some of their overperforming units. Gunnery Mob now have the standard 90 range for a handgun unit. Ooh, that's nice. Animated Hulks have received a considerable change in Celestial's Knight's errant summon no longer uses lance formation. Mournguls have received a bit of a buff across the board though, with some additional attributes to improve their utility. So Mournguls added Hiding Fortress, added Strider, okay, and added attribute removed Rampage for the Night Terrors. Same thing with the Haunter here as well. So nice to see that, how that works. For the Vampire Counts have been overperforming across the board. These tweaks mainly target healing abilities and Crypt Horrors as their combination of regeneration and high HP pool made for truly formidable units. Graveguard and Black Knights have also had their magical attacks removed, meaning that Vampire Counts need to rely on AoE abilities in order to deal with physical resistance. Damn, that's pretty wild for them. And we saw too how the Unholy Lodestone and how the Mortis engine works, and the increase to cost of both Invocation of Heck as well as Summon Dead, Animate Dead, right? Remove magical attacks across the board. That's pretty much the big thing there. Warriors of Chaos. Not too many changes to the Warriors of Chaos and divided units in this update. The main change here is that the base stats of Chaos Knights have been improved as they were underperforming slightly. Dragon Ogres and Shaggoths have also received some buffs, so they're a bit more viable. Dragon Mount, remove flaming attacks. We talked about those before. The Chaos Knights go from 32 to 37 and 14 to 16 on their base and now weapon and AP damage. And for Dragon Ogres, upkeep cost has gone down by 13. The recruitment cost has gone down by 50 as well, which is pretty nice. I like that. Shaggoth has had a 20-point increase to base weapon and a 30-point increase to AP and 1.5 or a 0.5 increase to splash attack knockback force multiplier, which is cool. Wood Elves. The big change to Wood Elves this time around revolve around Treemen, who are currently underperforming. Treemen have received a buff to their weapon strength, HP, and knockback multiplier, which means that they should be a bit more effective in prolonged fights and clear enemies out of it better. Wild Riders have received a mass buff along with some changes to Hawk Riders, which should make them a bit less paper thin in melee. Always love to see that. And Dirthu's got these changes, which I imagine are going to be across the board for all our big boys. But it's a reduction in base weapon damage, excuse me, and an increase in AP damage by 30. Splash attack has gone from 1 to 2, so it just doubled. And then building damage multiplier from 1 to 1.25. So expect that across the board. And I can see that here also with an increase to health by about 5, just shy of 500. So you can see those values right there. Again, base weapon damage decrease, AP damage increase. Into that was our last one. That was our last one there. Well, yeah, recruitment cost then for Hawk Riders, the upkeep cost is 250 now up to 263, and the recruitment cost has gone up by 50. So those are all of our patch notes. Let's just jump into a quick conclusion to just sum everything up. And by summing everything up, I mean let's talk about the up next section. So again, this just kind of just says, hey, 3.1 is around the corner, and we shan't go into details here. Well, we'll surely wait. We shan't go into the details here as well. We've surely all had our fill by now. But expect yet more fix-based wholesomeness when update 3.1 arrives in a few weeks. From everyone at Total War team, thank you for your patience and support, whether you've been with us since the start or you're a new addition to the family. We still have plenty more to come to Warhammer 3, and as always, we'll keep you updated as the journey continues. See you on the battlefield. Okay, I was looking to see if there's any of those like, oh, this could hint at the future. So this is supposed to be like the largest content drop in that Total War has ever seen. And this just seems like it's like 2.2, 2.1, just a bigger 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, 4, 5, whatever the hell, right? It just seems like a lot of tweaks and fixes. It doesn't necessarily feel like a massive content drop. I mean, we got a DLC, yeah, absolutely. And with that, we got an FLC hero, to be expected. Then we got the Mountains of Madness or Shadow over Innsmouth, whatever H.P. Lovecraft inspired Tzeentchian thing we got, which is like the same thing as the lab from Warhammer 2. So I don't really look at that as a pure content drop. I look at that as a fun little bang around once or twice mode. So while it is a cool set of patch notes and I'm stoked on it, I'm really excited for 3.1. I'm excited for the next DLC, whenever the hell that is. And I love this DLC. I feel like this was maybe like, I don't know, pumped up a little too much, hyped up a little too much. And you guys can let me know. Maybe you think totally otherwise. I just think that maybe I was expecting other things that I have not experienced in the patch so far playing the Chaos Dwarfs. Like, oh man, here's all these changes to the Dark Elves slave economy, which has been a pain point for years. Or hey, here's a big change to the geomantic web that you guys said you were probably going to start working on. Or hey, here's that Norska old world update that we have talked about. Sorry, my allergies are crushing me right now. And we didn't really get any of that. And especially now with the Chaos Dwarfs coming in, the Dwarfs campaign just feels so bare bones. So stoked on 3.0, stoked on the Chaos Dwarfs. Ulrika is going to be pretty fun to play as. And I think a lot of the things that did come are really great changes, especially that articulation point with the chariots and stuff like that. Never ever thought of that as being an issue. So stoked to see all that, but I would have loved to have seen like actual pivotal changes to certain campaigns that make them way more, I don't know, bland by comparison to how amazing Chaos Dwarfs campaign is, right? It's like every time I get a DLC, the ones that are not good are glaringly not good, more and more so, right? The next DLC, whatever it is, right? Let's just say it's something wild, like they finally brought in Ind or Koresh or Napone or any of those guys. Let's say they just did that. Or they just did another DLC pack for like Cathay and they added in the Monkey King. It's just going to keep making Dwarfs look boring, High Elves look boring, Lizardmen looking more and more and more and more boring, even though they've had DLCs that add tons of content to them. So go ahead and let me know what you feel about this in the comment section below. Are you stoked on 3.0 and this is exactly the patch you wanted, or do you feel like this was maybe a little overhyped, or maybe this fixed all the things that you never ever touch, but it fixed all the things you do touch? Let me know how you're feeling about 3.0. Very stoked on you guys finally getting access to the Chaos Dwarfs and jumping in, my bros. So enjoy the weekend ahead. Have some fun with the Forge of the Chaos Dwarfs. Please do go check out all my other bros that have put out so much content for the Chaos Dwarfs up to this point. If you're getting stuck on anything, someone's going to have a guide somewhere on something. If it's not me, it's Great Book of Grudges, it's Lorester Sotek, it's Indie Pride, it's Dov Plays, it's Party Elite, it's Turin, it's anyone, right? So go ahead and check all those bros out who have tons of awesome content. But as always, guys, thank you so much for watching here today. Have a good one and take care.